When you first enter the world of PC building, it can quickly become very daunting. There's terminology, brands, and general know-how that can all sound so foreign to a newbie. Hi there, I'm Sarah from Thermaltake Australia, and this video is dedicated to all the beginner builders out there. Here are the answers to 7 common PC tech questions for beginners. What are the differences between eATX, ATX, and MATX motherboards? So this was a question I literally had to jot down during a meeting one day to Google later on, because as a beginner, I literally had no idea what anyone was talking about. They basically refer to the size of the motherboard itself. The ATX motherboard is the standard size, standing for Advanced Technology Extended. The eATX, Extended ATX, motherboard is larger in size than the ATX. Therefore, the larger motherboard comes with more functionality, such as having more PCIe slots for your high-speed components like your graphics cards. In contrast, the smaller sizes like the Micro ATX and even the Mini ITX, which stands for Information Technology Extended, have had extension slots removed on the motherboard in order to be a smaller size and fit smaller builds. So just make sure when you're choosing a motherboard that it actually fits the case you want. What is AIO cooling? So, confession time, when I started working here, I discovered that I've had an all-in-one cooler in my PC at home for the entire 2 years that I've owned it, and I had absolutely no idea. So if you're anything like I was and have no idea what AIO cooling even is, in my case, so much so I didn't even know what it looked like, we've got you. AIO stands for All-in-One Cooling and is a form of water cooling. You can recognize an AIO cooler from a traditional fan cooler pretty easily, in that a fan cooler will sit directly on top of your CPU, whereas an AIO cooler will have a water block sitting above the CPU. And then there will be 2 hoses connecting that with a radiator, which gets mounted somewhere else in your build. AIO coolers are a great alternative to complex water-cooled builds and are a great way to experience the sleek look and awesome power of water cooling without the hassle of making it all yourself. What are the different case sizes and how do I choose which one to use? When looking at buying a case, you may have come across a few terms to describe the different sizes. Now, while these aren't exact terms, the most common ones you'll come across are mini tower, mid tower, and full tower. These 3 basically incrementally describe the size, so mini, mid, and then full. However, sometimes they aren't fully exact, and sometimes they even use different terminology too. For example, micro instead of mini, and super instead of full. One of the things to consider when choosing a case is, as we talked about prior, your motherboard size. Sometimes certain motherboards may only fit within certain size cases, so if you have a motherboard in mind or you've purchased one already, double check that the case you want will fit its size. Secondly, take into consideration the upgradability of the case in case you want to upgrade in future. Some cases come with more slots and bays for installing additional drives, support for more graphics cards, and more options for cooling. Lastly, you've got to factor in appearance. Your PC can be as personable as you like, and if you wanted to have flashy internals, some cases will work better with these aesthetically than others. What is RAM? Now, I know some of you out there might be shaking your heads, laughing, and saying something along the lines of, how can you not know what RAM is? But really, RAM is one of those things that you kind of pick, set, and then forget. And on top of that, RAM isn't really talked about all that much in the tech community. We're far too busy talking about CPUs and fancy graphics cards, so you can't really blame newbies for not really knowing what RAM is. RAM stands for Random Access Memory, and the name basically describes most of what it does. It essentially temporarily stores information for your PC to run the thing that you want it to run, instead of having to constantly refer back to data tucked deep away in your system storage. So, say you want to open a game. When you double-click that icon, your PC will put all the details it needs to run that from the system storage, pop it into your random access memory. It basically serves as a short-term memory, which of course is limited, which is why people running heavier programs sometimes need more RAM. What is ARGB lighting and how is it different from RGB lighting? So this is a question I actually remember researching myself because I had no idea what ARGB meant and what the difference was between that and RGB. The main times you come across these words is when you're dealing with things like fans, LED strips, or RGB strips on the front of your case. It's basically the stuff that gives your PC pretty colours. Firstly, RGB refers to the LED lighting that some products have built into them, such as fans and power supplies. Addressable RGB, or ARGB, runs off a 5V header, which allows you to have many more options like intensity, and you can apply a different setting to each separate ARGB item, creating a rainbow effect. In contrast, the standard RGB lighting runs on 12V headers, which means it can really only display one colour at a time and will display the same on one as it does on all other lighting. ARGB lighting basically just gives you more options, and if you have a specific lighting configuration in mind, ARGB is probably more for you. Should I pick AMD or Intel? This question pertains to the well-known battle between AMD and Intel, specifically over their CPUs. This is actually a pretty common question a lot of builders ask themselves at the beginning of a build, because a lot of their other components, especially things like motherboards, may need to be switched out depending on which chip you use. The best way to tackle this question is to ask yourself, what will the purpose of my PC be? AMD tends to be the more cost-effective option, offering pretty reliable standard processing power. Intel is usually the more expensive option, but known for delivering higher quality CPUs which have been designed with gaming in mind, as well as having a very wide range. At the end of the day, AMD is overall better for the content creation side of things and considered to have a decent price and performance. Whereas if you have a bit more to spend on your build and want a top-tier gaming rig, you may as well go all out with a fancy Intel. How do I manage cables? The age-old question. Cable management. To begin with, a lot of your cable management will depend on your case, so take a good look there and see what cable routing options you have available. The best tips I can give is to try and plan out where your cables need to go before you install your motherboard fully. Getting cables in the closest position for installation is ideal to avoid headaches later. Another great tip is to invest in a lot of these cable ties. Tying big sections of cables together is especially helpful when trying to keep cables neat and discreet. A good general rule is to try and avoid diagonal lines as well, and having cables crisscross over one another, as overall that can start getting messy pretty fast. Thank you so much for watching the videos. If you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below. And if you know the answers, feel free to answer them too. We all help each other out here. Like the video if you did enjoy it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ding the bell to be notified each and every time we upload. And while you're still here, check out one of these cool Thermaltake videos floating around me, and I'll see you in the next one.